Hey everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we're diving into one of the most disturbing psychology experiments ever conducted, the Stanford Prison Experiment. Now, when people hear the word experiment, they picture something controlled, professional, maybe even boring. But this became something extremely different. What started as a simple university study about prison behavior turned into a psychology nightmare so intense that researchers had to shoot the entire thing down after only 6 days. And here's the really unsettling part. The people involved weren't criminals, they weren't violent, they weren't trained prison guards, they were just ordinary college students. So, how did things spiral out of control so quickly? That's what we're talking about today. The Stanford Prison Experiment took place in 1971 at Stanford University and was led by psychologist Philip Zimbardo. The goal sounded simple enough. Researchers wanted to understand how prison environments affect human behavior. Basically, they wanted to answer one huge question. Are people naturally cruel, or does the environment push them to become that way? To begin the study, researchers recruited a group of young college students. Every participant was considered mentally healthy, emotionally stable, and completely normal before the experiment started. Then, they were randomly split into two groups, guards and prisoners. And that detail is incredibly important. Nobody was specifically choosing to be dominant or submissive. Any one of these students could end up in either side. The researchers then transformed the basement of Stanford University into a fake prison, complete with cells, uniforms, schedules, and strict rules designed to feel as realistic as possible. But they didn't stop there. The students playing the prisoners were actually arrested at their homes by real police officers. Imagine that for a second. You're a college student, and suddenly you're being handcuffed, searched, fingerprinted, and taken away like a real criminal. Once inside the fake prison, the prisoners lost something else, their names. From that point on, they were identified only by numbers. That might not sound like a huge deal at first, but psychologically, it's massive. Taking away someone's name strips away part of their identity. It makes people feel less human and more like objects. Meanwhile, the guards were given uniforms, batons, mirror sunglasses, and authority over the prisoners. And those sunglasses actually matter more than you think, because the prisoners couldn't see the guards' eyes. It created emotional distance. The guards felt anonymous, detached, almost untouchable. At first, everything seemed relatively normal. The guards enforced rules. The prisoners followed instructions. The researchers observed. But then, things started changing. The guards slowly became more aggressive and controlling. Some began humiliating prisoners, insulting them, waking them up in the middle of the night, and inventing punishments for tiny mistakes. Prisoners were forced to do exhausting exercise, clean toilets with their bare hands, and follow degrading rules meant to make them feel powerless. And here's what makes the whole thing even more disturbing. The guards were never directly ordered to be cruel. That behavior developed on its own. The more power they felt, the more extreme some of them became. At the same time, the prisoners also start changing. Some became anxious and emotionally drained. Others became quiet, passive, almost completely submissive. It was like people stopped acting. They weren't playing guards and prisoners anymore. They became them. When prisoners suffered such an intense emotional breakdown that he had to leave the experiment after less than 2 days. At first, researchers thought he might just be pretending so he could go home early, but eventually they discovered something terrifying. The emotional damage was real. As the days passed, the situation only got worse. Some guards became openly abusive and seemed to enjoy humiliating the prisoners. And honestly, one of the scariest parts is that the guards who weren't abused usually didn't stop it either. They just watched it happen. Even though everyone knew the prison was fake, people slowly stopped behaving like students and completely adapted to their assigned roles. The environment itself started controlling their behavior. And what's even more shocking is that Philip Zimbardo, the psychologist running the experiment, also became emotionally involved. Instead of acting like a neutral researcher, he began behaving more like an actual prisoner superintendent. Even he got pulled into the atmosphere. Originally, the experiment was supposed to last 2 full weeks. It didn't even make it halfway. After only 6 days, the study was shut down. One of the main reasons came down to a grade student named Christina Maslash. When she visited the fake prison and saw what was happening, she was horrified. The prisoners looked emotionally broken. The guards seemed disturbingly comfortable with the abuse, and she asked a question nobody else apparently had. Why hasn't this been stopped already? That moment forced the researchers to confront how far things had gone. Once the experiment ended, it became instantly famous around the world. Some people believe it proved that ordinary people can become cruel when given power and authority. Others argue it shows how dangerous systems and environments can be in shaping human behavior. Either way, the Stanford Prison Experiment became one of the most famous psychology studies in history. Even today, it is still discussed in classrooms, documentaries, podcasts, and debates. But over time, serious criticisms start to emerge. Some researchers argued the experiment wasn't scientifically reliable because the guards may have been indirectly encouraged to act aggressively. In other words, the results might have been influenced by the researchers themselves. And then there's the ethical side. Modern psychologists widely agree that participants were exposed to unacceptable emotional stress and psychological harm. Today, an experiment like this will almost certainly never be approved. But even after more than 50 years, people still argue about what the experiment actually proved. Did power naturally transform the guards into cruel people? Or were they simply acting the way they thought they were expected to act? That question is part of why this case remains so fascinating. There is still no clear agreement about what really happened psychologically inside that basement. Personally, I think the most disturbing part is how quickly normal people changed once they were placed in certain roles and environments. It really shows how powerful authority, pressure, and social situations can be. At the same time, it also crossed serious ethical lines. The emotional damage wasn't fake. The fear wasn't fake. And for some participants, the experience stayed with them long after the experiment ended. The Stanford Prison Experiment remains like one of the most shocking and controversial psychology studies ever conducted because it forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about human nature, power, and how easily behavior can change under pressure. And honestly, that's probably why people are still talking about it more than 50 years later. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you